Many of you have been waiting for this for quite some time now, and I've been meaning to put this out there for quite some time. Finally, I am giving you my rock lead guitar tones that I use for my live solo gigs. Now, the unit that I'm getting these tones out of is the Line 6 Pod Go, this cool little box right here, a little floorboard right here. But hang tight, even if you don't have the Pod Go or if you have no intention of getting the Pod Go, this video can still help you because I'm going to give you the details of all my settings, and you can mimic those in whatever amp sim or amp or processor that you're playing through to get a tone that's at least similar to what you're about to hear. Now, this lead guitar tone is extremely versatile. It can be used, in my opinion, really in just about any subgenre of rock. And I'm talking anything from soft rock, where you kind of want those creamy solos with that saturation, to mainstream rock, to southern rock, to even some of the harder rock styles, which of course the video you just heard was kind of that. Make sure you hang around till the end of the video. I've got two surprises for you. Well, I'll tell you what those surprises are. First of all, I'm going to explain why I'm using this Pod Go, and this is going to shed some light for a lot of you guys who play live solo gigs. I think you're going to be interested to kind of see how this thing works for me on stage. The second thing is I'm going to give you a resource with the screenshots of all of my settings, the amp, the cab settings, even the effects that I'm using to get this tone. So hang around to the end of the video and I'll show you where to get that. Let's dig into the settings, and the first thing I'm going to share with you is the most important piece, the amp sim. So what I'm using here is what Line 6 calls their Brit J45 amp sim, and this amp sim is based on the Marshall JTM45. Now, I did a little research here, and most of the stuff I got from Wikipedia, so feel free to research it as well. The JTM45, that's the Marshall JTM45, that is basically Marshall's first amplifier that they created. Now, back in this day, guitarists and musicians, they were wanting an alternative to the Fender amps. That was like the amp back in the day. So Jim Marshall, of course, teamed up with his son Terry Marshall, hence JTM45, and they came out with this really cool sounding amp. Now, the amp went out of production after a few years, and then they came back with a reissue, I believe, in 1989, and then another reissue or different style of that amp in 2014. Now, the JTM45 has been used by some extremely notable guitar players, a few of them being Gary Moore, Jimi Hendrix, Pete Townshend, David Gilmour, and I believe Angus Young used this amp on occasion as well. And of course, the list goes on. And this amp was mainly known to be used for blues and rock, not so much hard rock or metal. However, I believe, and you're going to hear some more clips, that this can kind of cross over into that hard rock and classic metal if you wanted to use it for that. So what we're going to do now, we're going to dive into the computer here. We're going to jump into the Pod Go editing software so that I can show you the screen and just briefly go through the settings with you. But before we do that, let's hear another music clip. This is from a recent live show using this tone. So we just went over the type of amp. This is again the Brit J45, and I want to just briefly go over the settings of the amp. You see my drive is up there pretty high, and that's because this is not a high gain amp. You have to remember, this is not like a heavy metal or even hard rock amp. You know, it's more of that blues rock style. So my drive is up there pretty high at 8.9. My bass is cut a little bit, and this amp seems to have a lot of bottom end, or I should say this amp sim. I don't know if the actual amp has a bottom end or not, but the sim does. I do have my mids boosted here. My treble, of course, is boosted. My presence is boosted. These kind of help it cut through a little bit better for this particular sim. My channel volume's right there at 5.5. Now, the Pod Go and maybe other Line 6 units have this, the sag, the hum, ripple, bias, and this bias X, whatever this. I don't touch those. Maybe I should, you know, mess around with those some, but you guys know I'm like Leonard Skinner. I'm a simple man. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I got a good tone out of these settings here. Let's hop over to the cab. So nothing special here. I just use the cab that is paired with by default, and that's the 412 Greenback 20 here. I am using, and this is a big factor in your tone with the Pod Go, is the mic. I'm using the 121 ribbon mic, and I'll be honest with you guys, I think this mic probably sounds the best in the Pod Go for almost everything that I've gone through. The other mics, just not fans of them at all. Now the distance, the low cut, all this good stuff, I just left it at default. Now I want to get over to something really important for this amp when you want that lead tone that has that fullness and sustain, and that's the two pedals that I have in front of the amp. So the very first pedal that I have is this blue compressor here. You see my sustain is boosted a little bit to 0.68. The level is at 0.54. That may have been the default settings when I put this in here. I think I may have boosted the sustain a little bit after that. I can't remember, but anyway, again, I'll have this information for you at the end of the video. I'll show you where to get this information, okay? Next, I have got the Compulsive Drive, and I believe this is modeled after, was it full tone OCD pedal? But in any case, I've got my gain cranked up there quite a bit. And again, for this amp, it's not a high gain amp. It might sound like, well, you got a lot of drive and gain on this thing, but even with this pedal and even with the drive on the amp kind of cranked up there, you know, you're not going to get like a super metal sound out of this thing, okay? It's more for that really creamy kind of, again, bluesy, rock-driven sound there. So you see my settings here. My tones up the middle there, my levels cranked up just a little bit there. So now let's move to the effects that I have in the quote-unquote effects loop of this amp sim. So first I've got some reverb, just using the standard Line 6 plate reverb here. You can see my settings. I'm not going to go through these, but you know, there's not a ton of reverb, but there's a little bit just to kind of give it that, you know, I don't know, just kind of gives it that spacey mix there. Actually, you see the mix down here, it's at 27%, so I guess there's a little more than I thought. We go to the next and final effect that I have on here. It's just a Line 6 simple delay. Same thing, I love having some reverb and some delay on my leads. I just think it kind of just helps them stand out a little bit better. And I love ending on those notes, having that delay carry over. It just sounds really cool. So anyway, you can see the settings on here. The mix here is about 34%. The feedback's 47%. Those are kind of your two core settings for delay. My time is at 625 milliseconds. You can mess around with that. I kind of like that for most of the stuff that I do on stage here, but again, you know, feel free to mess around with that. Now, I'd like for you to hear a little clip that I was messing around with today in the studio. I came up with this really cool ambient tone, which actually I created with this unit, the Line 6 Pod Go, but I'm playing the lead guitar part with this tone that we're talking about in this video. So check this out. So you may be wondering, Jason, why did you get the Line 6 Pod Go? Why didn't you just get the Helix if you're going to go with Line 6? Or why didn't you get the Kemper or Axe FX or some other prestigious amp sim and effects unit? The answer is kind of twofold here. One is I wanted to simplify my live solo gigs on stage. And by getting one unit that I can play both acoustic and electric through, which I do both with this unit now, well, that solved that problem. Number two, I'm not playing heavy metal. I'm not really even playing hard rock. I'll break out some solos like you heard. Actually, I've got one more for you to hear coming up too. But I don't need the super high gain metal sounding amps for what I'm doing. So that kind of like eliminates the need for something like the Helix or AXE-FX or Kemper or any of those units. I just needed some good clean tones for my guitar and some good tones that I could dial in for acoustic, which I'll get into that in a separate video. And of course, I wanted this really cool sounding rock lead guitar tone that I'm sharing with you guys in this video, and this unit provides all that for a fraction of the cost of what the Helix or any of these other units cost. So it was kind of a no-brainer to just go with the Pod Go. So this really simplified my stage setup. You know, when you're playing live solo gigs, and guys, I'm gigging now probably on average I'd say twice a week, sometimes more than that. There's one week coming up where I've got like 4 gigs 4 nights in a row. I'm certainly not complaining. I'm very grateful and happy about that. And by the way, I want to say real quick, thank you so much for every one of you who are in my area that show up to my live gigs. I really appreciate that. By the way, if you're not following me on Facebook and Instagram, I post a lot of stuff on there, but I also post my live gig schedule and my upcoming shows. So make sure you follow me on those platforms as well. There are links for both of those in the description of this video. So yeah, the Pod Go is just cost effective and its simplification for my stage setup. Lastly, I want to share a really cool resource with you and show you where you can get the screenshots for all of my tones that we discussed in this video. And I'll tell you now real quick, there's a link in the description of this video that goes to a blog post where I've got all of that information for you. So click that link, and maybe you want to save that in your favorites. If you're using Google Chrome or Safari, whatever browser you're using, just bookmark it or save it in your favorites or whatever, so you always have that as a resource. And again, even if you don't have the Pod Go or have no intention of getting the Pod Go or any Line 6 unit, you've still got my settings there, and you can use those and try to mimic that in whatever you're using, whatever amp sim or processor or even a live amp. Hey, mimic those settings and see what you come up with. Also in that blog post, I'm going to include my clean lead guitar tones that I use for my live gigs as well. You may remember probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago I put out a video on my clean tones. I'll put a link up there if you guys want to catch that. But I will include the screenshots for those tones as well in that blog post. So that's going to be just a huge amount of cool information for you to have and a lot of tones. And I want to encourage you guys real quick, if you're still watching, thank you by the way, I appreciate you watching the end of my videos here. I want to encourage you guys, if you're not playing live, to consider getting out there, consider putting yourself out there. I know some of you watching this just play guitar as a hobby. Hey, that's fine, that's awesome, but at least play live in front of some people, some friends, or maybe go to an open mic night. That is a really good way to just kind of get your feet wet, you know, and just start, you know, putting yourself out there a little bit. Yeah, it's uncomfortable at first, and you may feel like, well, this is just not natural for me. You will be surprised how natural it begins to feel and how amazing it is when you get up there in front of folks and sing and play or do anything. Even if you don't sing, which you should do that too, but we'll talk about that in another video. At least play some tunes, play an instrumental in front of folks, and it's kind of a release. I don't know, I can't explain the feeling, but it's just an amazing feeling. So I want to encourage you to get out there and try it. Now, of course, if you're already gigging, the Pod Go, and this is not sponsored by the way, this is a very cool unit that simplifies your live setup. It really simplifies everything for you. You don't have to have a separate device for acoustic and electric, or an amp for this, an amp for that. None of that. This plugs directly into my board, and that is it. I do use an external looper. The Pod Go does have its own looper, but I don't like how many clicks you have to do to get there, and if I want to switch patches and so forth. So I actually use the Ditto X4 by TC Electronics. I'm gonna do a video on that. I'm just learning how to properly use that a little better. I kind of use it in the most basic way you can use a looper, so I need to dig in a little deeper before I can do a video and put it out there for you guys. And I might end up upgrading loopers before I even get to that. So I don't know, we'll see. I'll talk more about that because looping has become a little bit bigger part of my live shows. I love to be able to play a rhythm and then play some lead guitar over that, like you heard in this video several times. That just really spices up the show. So if you play live, this is another good thing that you can do just to kind of, one, give your voice a break, and it just gives the audience something a little different that they may not be used to hearing. And you don't necessarily have to shred. If you don't shred, that's fine. Just get up there and play a rhythm, loop that rhythm, and then maybe play another rhythm that kind of harmonizes with it, or just play something simple. it just gives the audience something different, because at the end of the day, it's all about the audience. You know, you want to make it fun for them. What gives them something different than just, you know, the standard, okay, there's somebody singing and playing guitar for 3-4 hours. You know, it kind of breaks up the show a little bit. And again, I'm looking to dive a little bit deeper into that. I want to get some natural organic percussion in there, maybe like beating on my acoustic for some drums or something like that. And of course, I will share my journey with you guys. So folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, there are links in the description of this video, many links, but that first link is going to be to that blog post where I have the screenshots available for you for all of my lead tones that I use for both clean electric and the distorted, that rock tone that you heard in this video here. There are also links to my free metal guitar practice guide as well as my metal guitar courses. So yeah, spend some time, do me a huge favor and spend some time in the description of this video and check my stuff out. It's a great way to support what I do, and of course I truly appreciate that. Guys, thank you for watching this. Smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed. I will see you on the next video. Before we go though, let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this tone. More importantly, let me know if there's anything that you would like for me to cover that pertains to live solo gigs. You know, this has become such a big part of my life and my music career. I mean, you guys know I am a full-time musician. This is all I do. I do a lot of different stuff, but it all pertains to music. And these live gigs have become such a huge part of this now. We're filming this in what, March of 2022. April, I've got like, I think 12 or 13 gigs already lined up. So yeah, it's getting crazy in a really awesome way. So leave me any questions that you might have about live gigs specifically, and I'd be happy to answer them and maybe make some videos on that topic as well. Guys, thank you again for watching. You know what to do. Until next time, keep it metal.